What's your glitch in the Matrix story? When I was a kid, I was into magic tricks. I sat my parents down to show them that I could make a large bouncy ball disappear by dropping it down my shirt. The idea was that I'd catch it before it fell all the way through and pretend it was gone. I failed a couple times as I demonstrated it, the ball falling through my shirt and rolling to the couch each time. The last time I dropped the ball down my shirt, I didn't catch it and it never came out. I searched and I couldn't find it. My parents congratulated me and resumed to their chores. I never did find the ball. I stopped doing magic tricks. We have a regular who comes into Starbucks almost every morning right when we open. I saw him walk in one time, said hello, then looked up again and he wasn't there. Then about 2 seconds later he walks in the door. I say hello, and he says hi and orders his coffee. I never skip my caffeine before work now. I was about 8 years old or so and was on my bed playing Barbies. I was using my hairbrush to brush their hair because those plastic Barbie brushes were trash. Anyway, I was brushing the hair, then set the hairbrush next to me to reach for another Barbie. Reached back and the hairbrush was gone. No big deal, as I assumed it fell between the bed and the wall. Got on my stomach and peered down. Nothing. No hairbrush. Looked under the bed. Nothing. Shrugged it off and assumed it was wedged somewhere I couldn't see. So I went downstairs to the bathroom cabinet to get another hairbrush. Opened it, and the brush I was using was front and center. I moderately freaked out and ran outside because it was really startling. I still have no idea how or what happened. My best story goes as such. I was in the car with my friend and his dad. Dad was driving, friend in passenger, and I was in the seat behind the passenger on the right hand side. As we slowly pass a fire hydrant before pulling into my friend's driveway, I notice that it looks as if half of the hydrant was a foot taller and off to the side a bit. Between the two halves was a shimmering digital cluster duck. It then quickly snapped back into the place before my very eyes. Thought I was just hallucination, until my boy up front mentioned it. What the duck was that, he said. You see what I saw? The fire hydrant? He confirmed that we had seen the same exact thing. I just asked him about if he remembers it. He does. We call it the glitch. Not as intense as others in here, but here goes. Was in the backseat of a taxi when the man on the radio goes, "You're listening to Galaxy 106.1. And then the name of the station comes up on the little radio screen in moving letters. First showing Galaxy, then moving to show Axie 106.1. I raise my eyes, and the license plate of the car ahead was Axie 1061. I have a very vivid memory from middle school, where I was hanging out in my yard with a friend and she described the entire plot of The Princess Bride to me in detail. Everything from the Dread Pirate Roberts thing to the Rouet says. A couple weeks later, I watched the movie for the first time at an aunt's house and knew everything that was going to happen ahead of time. I specifically picked it out from her collection because my friend had described it to me and I was really interested in actually seeing it. After the weekend was over, I went back to the friend who had described it to me and told her I had finally seen The Princess Bride. She had no idea what I was talking about. She had never heard of the movie or book and had no recollection of the plot when I described it to her. I knew she wasn't messing with me, because she was never able to keep a straight face for that long when she was kidding around. She truly had no idea what I was talking about and didn't remember ever having described it to me. I'm engaged to a girl whose husband passed away before we got together. His name was also my name, Charlie. When he was 13 he had a lawn business ran by his friends and he was the boss leaded that searched for new yards to cut. I literally did the same thing, literally exactly the same. His favorite color was green as is mine. A lot of his favorite songs from when he was alive are my favorite songs. His daughter resembled a kid that could pass as mine. I could seriously go on and on about how strange this sheet is, but these are a few of the things that are like, wow. He kind of looks like me also, but you gotta figure girls kind of have a type they like, so that part makes sense. I was sitting at the table, home alone. Suddenly, I was physically shoved out of my chair. I never felt anything contact my skin, but I absolutely 100% felt a force applied to the side of my face. As if a hand that I didn't know was there was already resting on my skin, waiting for the moment to push. My head jerked to the side and I was knocked out of the chair, fell to the ground. Hairiest moment of my life, and I've never told anyone IRL about it. Was looking out a front window of our house when a white FedEx truck with the blue and orange lettering drove by at roughly the speed limit. The driver door was open, and the driver had a dusky complexion. Was wearing the standard black shorts and shirt. Looked at my computer for about 30 seconds. Looked up, and a white FedEx truck with the blue and orange lettering drove by at roughly the speed limit. The driver door was open, and the driver had a dusky complexion. Was wearing the standard black shorts and shirt. At this point, I am no longer convinced any of you are real. I was 4. I had a large stuffed bear. I was pretending to feed it raisins. Take a raisin, put it in the red velvet mouth, move the chin up and down. Of course, the raisin would fall to the floor, and I'd do it again. Ultimately, the raisin disappeared. I am 56 and remember it like was 52 years ago. Was watching TV and I lost the remote. Looked everywhere. Under the cushions. Behind the couch I'd had a snack, so I checked the kitchen. Couldn't find it. Figure I'll find it later, go back to lying on the couch and watching my show. Little bit later I'm channel surfing and I realize the remote is in my hand. I have no idea where it was, I literally found it in my hand. One time I was at the hospital while my dad was getting surgery done. My grandfather and I were watching TV in the waiting room. Just then we saw a woman getting a drink from the vending machine in the waiting room, and as soon as we looked back toward the TV we saw the same woman wearing the same outfit on a live television program. My grandfather and I were stunned. All he could say was, "How did she get there?" My wife and I got a dog from a shelter. It's a pug. Yep, he is an inbred monstrosity. Well, maybe 6 months into owning him. We are out walking. He goes underneath the porch. This dog is just under there for 15 minutes doing his thing while we are frantically trying to get his attention. He comes out with a slightly different coloration pattern on his back. He is fawn. And he came out much lighter. Like, you wouldn't be able to tell with pictures, but just by the fact we look at him every day. He was just lighter in color. He had a black and tan stripe down his back. Now it's more tan. It sounds weird, I know. Like, how can you tell such a small change or difference? Well, we could. So, that day we lost Otis 1.0 and got back Otis 2.0. I was at my uncle's house when we decided to go on a hike. He lives in the mountains. We went down to the local pond, climbed a bit of a hill, and when we were done, we decided we were hungry. We started to walk back when I saw a flock of birds just sitting in the air, flapping their wings, but just sitting there, completely still. I even stopped walking for a bit to make sure they weren't just slow. The whole flock was just stuck. It was weird. My dad told me this from his childhood. He was born in 1922 and this happened when he was 12 years old. So the year was 1934. He lived in S.E., Oklahoma in a place called Boggy Bottom. Extremely rural area, especially back in those days. Nothing around but lots of farmland for miles and miles. It was a hot summer night and he couldn't sleep. So he snuck out the window and went to a nearby cow pasture to look at the stars under a tree. He said that after a few minutes of stargazing, 3 lights showed up in the sky. They were moving in geometric patterns across the sky very quickly. First in one part of the sky, then another. He watched these lights in the sky for hours and their methodical, geometrically patterned movements. Then, they raced across the night sky and disappeared. Please note that my dad was always a stable, rock solid guy. both emotionally and mentally. I believe that he saw what he saw. Sometimes I have deja vu, and it's at the point where I realize it's happening and I know what's going to happen next, and it all happens exactly as I remember it. It's like I lived that moment before, but it doesn't happen like how most describe it, where they have the moment and feel deja vu. I know it's happening and I know what's going to happen next, and it's all exact. Like I know what's going to happen before it does, and I know what someone will say or do before they do it. It happens a lot and it weirds me the duck out. I was packing up and getting ready to move to a new place. As I was taking apart my desk, I dropped a screw. I heard the screw hit the floor. But when I went to look for it, it was gone. There were no cracks in the floorboards it could have fallen into. And no vents on the floor. We emptied literally every single thing from that room. And never found the screw. It had simply ceased to exist. I was cleaning 9/11 barges on Staten Island. The bottoms of them had to be vacuumed out where the excavators couldn't reach. I was wearing a Gumby suit, working a 6-inch vacuum hose. It was an emotional time for me because we kept finding blank plastic rectangles in the rubble. Those were people's ID badges that had been scrubbed blank between the airplane attacks, the excavators and loaders, and the excavator and the trucks and the barges. Suddenly, I found a very clean, legible ID of a nation dude. May he rest in peace. I grabbed it and ran to the edge of the barge, to the ladder, and told my boss what I had found. In his best Chinese accent he said that he didn't order any egg foo young. I ran up the ladder, grabbed him and began to pound his face, with tears streaming down my own. All the 3-letter agencies milling about and watching. Suddenly, I felt an electric shock and I was on the bottom of the barge again. I hadn't been up the ladder yet. My brother and I each had a dream about the same thing. We didn't mention it till a few days later, as we both had drawn it somewhat and the pictures were eerily similar. We were around 10 and 13 at the time, so we didn't think much of it. Well, our dream just so happened to be an update for a game we played and was released a year or so later. We had never talked about it before the dream. And after the update we tried it out. Only for it to look almost exactly, during an animation, like the picture. We can't really prove we drew it before it happened. But I have the picture somewhere cause we like to talk about it every once in a while. When I was young I really liked magic, and I saw a trick where a guy pushed a dime through the bottom of the cup. I tried it in my room for hours. I rubbed the dime with the back of a spoon and pushed it through the bottom of the cup. No holes. Nothing. It just went through. I told my dad, but he didn't believe me. I don't know what the explanation is. It literally just went through. My kid brain could be misremembering, but yeah. When I was 15, me and my friend were driving at night. We saw this old man with a long walking stick. He had bells hanging from everything. We get to my house, a 15-minute walk from where we saw him. We got out of the car and there he was, just walking loaded with bells. It was freaky. Just the other day actually, I was at work making bread. We have this machine called a sheeter that rolls the dough into the loaf shape for you. My dough was a little dry, so I put one through alone to make sure they would all come out okay before I started the rest of them. But the one never came out. I looked all over the floor, up inside the machine and everything. I even took the machine apart to try to find where this dough ball went. Never found it. I'm afraid the machine is going to break in the next week or so, and then I'll find it. Haha. I dropped one of my earrings on the bathroom floor and watched it slide into the corner. I washed my hands and went to pick it up. It was gone. I proceeded to look around as if it somehow magically moved itself. Nothing. We've moved since then and it was never found. I had a vivid dream once about my sister asking me to look after her baby for her while she went and done something. I had never seen this baby before, as it was a boy and she had a little girl. She told me his name was Taylor and I needed to protect him while she was busy. Woke up and thought nothing of it and didn't speak about it. I have weird dreams all the time, so it doesn't bother me. Anyways, a few months later my sister tells us she is pregnant again. Yay. Again. Didn't think anything of it. baby was born and she had a boy and called him Taylor. Then I thought about it and freaked the duck out. I now feel like I should be constantly protecting him like Dream Sister asked me to. Not mine, but my cousin once told me he and a friend of his both remembered hanging out and doing all kind of stuff during a summer. They remember the exact same things. The thing is, it was impossible. Because his friend goes to his family's hometown every single summer and expended there the whole summer visiting his grandparents and family. When I was a teenager we lived out in the country and there was a road with a big hill at the end of it that they didn't plow in the winter, so it was a prime spot to go sledding. We lived within walking distance, but for some reason on this day my mom drove us. After a few hours of sledding we were packing the sleds into our SUV. It had one of those back doors you lifted up and it stayed in place until you pulled it down. I was standing underneath the door looking into the back of our vehicle when the door came down and slammed shut. Where I was standing it should have come down on my head, but it was like it literally went through me to shut. I have always wondered how it managed to do that. Maybe I wasn't as far under it as I thought, but I distinctly remember being startled because I knew I was standing under it. I'm sure this has happened to most people. Have you ever looked for something you need and remember exactly where you last left it but it's not there? If you persist in looking for the object, it eventually reappears exactly where you looked and knew it should be there. It seems to take an hour or so of looking everywhere else and going back to the same place several times before you find it. I think of this as the borrower's doing. It's weird. Either I have a blind spot and can't see something in plain sight, or it falls into some dimensional hole and will only return if I persist on finding it. This lunchtime. Driving a route I often take. Stopped at a junction. This is in the UK. Looked right. Saw no cars down the street. Then left. Then right again as I started to pull out. A car was only a few feet away from me. And we both braked. He was pissed off at me and blew his horn and I could see him waving his arms. He seriously wasn't there when I looked right. I could see right down the street. The only explanation was, it was a grey car. His lights weren't on. It was a miserable day. His car must have been camouflaged against the road. Yesterday during my class I looked down and a 10cm piece of the tip of my shoelace was laying next to my shoe with a near perfect cut. I know for a fact that nobody could have cut it, and the cut itself looked like had been done by a hot knife with melted tips. None of my friends knew what had happened. It's super bizarre.